It's a testament to commitment. We want to get this right and we want to do things correctly.
What does that even mean? A brand with such a rich history in footwear, soccer, and basketball. How does a brand overcome the challenges of coming into this sport and community that's still developing and has largely been appreciated by the smaller brands? What many people don't know is that this brand is actually a licensee of Adidas. So how did this even come about, and what does this mean?
We don't have to do it the way that everybody's done it.
We'll dive into their upcoming products, signing the #1 men's doubles and singles player, and what's next for this global household brand.
How do you connect with a group so big and varied where traditional approaches to consumer would not really be appropriate? Big story. It was an interesting idea because people are moving weights around, they're moving lead tape, they're doing things to their paddle. Believe it or not, when this paddle was submitted to USAP way back when to get approved, USAP did not deal with foam cores at the time. This is a foam core. So there was not only a rule allowance to allow this innovation, there was also a rule allowance to allow something removable on the paddle.
The main goal of the conversation I had with All Racket Sports' Brian Ogle is to try and figure out what is Adidas even trying to do in pickleball. This is Brian Ogle of All Racket Sports, but who is All Racket Sports and how are they tied to Adidas?
I think the genesis is, it's worth noting, as All Racket Sports, we're a licensee of Adidas, so we're building these products under license from Adidas. It's a situation where as they identify partners around the globe on things to represent their brand, they want to make sure they are partnering with the right companies to push not only sport, but their brand forward in the manner they want to see it pushed forward. Our group's held the license for almost a decade and a half against several products, not just pickleball, padel, beach tennis, pickleball, and pickleball paddles really now since 2021.
So this is really interesting. This is a new understanding to me. I wasn't aware that these massive brands license their brand to trusted partners. What this means is that Adidas may license its brand to companies that already specialize in areas like padel or pickleball, and these licensees handle everything from design to distribution while staying within Adidas's branding guidelines. It's a strategic move. Adidas gets to expand its presence in more sports and regions without having to build out every product line in-house. Meanwhile, the licensee benefits by getting to use one of the most recognizable logos in the world. The licensee has been in padel for a decade and a half. The reason I bring up padel is because a lot of their paddle products actually have carryover from that sport. The engineering, the factory, the design, the materials.
I can't speak for other brands, but I know as a partner with Adidas, where we manufacture and the standards we're held to are here. We can't just build anywhere we want and find the best costing or the cheapest labor or anything like that. We have to build in a facility where the audit says, okay, you can build here. Changes the landscape a little bit, but it doesn't make us exclusive because we build some paddles in the same factories where other companies build paddles. So I think the brands that are rising to the top and consistently delivering a product that is of good quality and good durability are migrating more and more to the same factories.
They also sponsored the #1 padel player, Alejandro Galan, which they've mimicked with the recent signing in pickleball.
What we can say about a contract is it's multi-year. It's Federico involved at a super granular level in development of paddles and those type of things. Something that, a signature paddle for him with some of the accessories that go with it, a bag, that type of thing.
What I was really curious about was what kind of advantages does a brand like Adidas have? And how does a licensee of Adidas differ from other brands in this space now?
We have prototyped paddles and delivered them in 5 days.
How did you do that?
Put someone in the factory, prototype the paddle, air freighted. And feedback loops like that. We did it on these, and we've done it on the one we're developing. And, Rafa has had a ton of input in how we matured his paddle because he was the first person to play with the metal bone. And Rafa had, so much input. He actually had a lot of really good, valuable input and insight into what was working and what wasn't, and how we morphed the paddle over time. Because even last year, you saw Rafa's play change as we started to redevelop his paddle, getting ready for this. And then Mari as well, different player, different characteristics. So we've been able to like take input on a weekend, Saturday at PPA tournament, bunch of emails, with time changes and dateline. I put it in on Saturday, Sunday night, my time, it's Monday, factory time. They're already working on the prototype, some back and forth. Okay, we're putting it on the plane on Tuesday. It's here Wednesday or Thursday, and we're testing it Friday, which is awesome, super expensive, but it's what it takes.
So the very first metal bone introduced to pickleball was launched in November of 2023. And while this product wasn't exactly the hit we may have all been expecting, they've certainly changed some things since then.
Well, I think, one thing you learn is, okay, it was a good idea, right? And it was executed pretty well, but it wasn't maybe executed exactly how the market was expecting it to be executed. And we learned a ton. And I think the biggest takeaway is we learned what to do differently. If you think about carbon fiber as a material just by itself, right? Carbon fiber, there's lots of different types of carbon fiber and how they're woven together and whether it's pre-preg or a different type. And at the end of the day, you can make carbon fiber stiffer or more malleable depending on how many threads you weave, how you weave them, how much glue you put in it. All those things. The biggest learning was we need to have a more responsive face on the paddle. And I think we needed to have a much more tactile surface on the paddle.
And finally, let's get to the paddles. Ever since the initial release and sighting of their top player using another brand's paddle, people have been waiting for their response to the criticisms. So, what's up with this unique paddle design?
Yeah, this is this is bringing the metal bone that the public knew. This is new for 25, and it's a little softer carbon fiber, a little more malleable carbon fiber. It's now a honeycomb core, not a PMI foam core, which is a different material altogether. The weight and balance system's still there, but the surface is now much grittier through the application of a sand mixture and also the removal of a lot of logoing right in the middle of the paddle face. And at the end of the day, these also have, it's hard to see on this, and I'll take one of these off to show you, but there's also a design characteristic with these paddles called low poly. And if you see low poly design, you've seen it. The best way I explain it to people is like on my pickup, my hood of my pickup is not completely flat, right? There's places where there's like a ridge where the metal's been bent. Low poly design is taking those different shapes, whether it's squares, pentagon, hexagon, polyhedron, and putting them together in a different way to create structural rigidity without a ton of weight, right? So you could push in the middle of your hood and kind of get a little bounce, but you can't push on where this metal is seamed or bent. Harder to push it and get any feedback right there. Now, if you dent it right there, you know how hard to go to the body shop and they're like, yeah, to pull a dent out of a crease is a pain. But to pull a dent out of like a car door, which is kind of dented in, they usually pop it out with a suction cup. Similar concept.
What effect are they looking for?
It creates, like in the throat of the paddle where this low poly design is, and I'll pull this off and show you, it's a way to create some structural rigidity and some firmness without adding a bunch of weight. Because if you add a bunch of weight here to create, a higher twist weight or, a lower center of gravity or whatever you're trying to create, the player's then going to have to, maybe they can't put the weight they want in terms of lead tape up here because the whole paddle's just going to be too heavy. Right? It's 16 millimeters. It's unidirectional carbon. It's EVA core with stringers, and it's a sand finish, and it incorporates low poly design.
Low poly, polypropylene.
No, low poly meaning all these little angles and shapes.
That's EVA.
It's EVA core. And you'll be able to differentiate the two EVA core models because the graphics on the paddle are solid, right? There's no broken line.
Okay.
There's no broken line. And the butt caps are red, right? So this is the metal bone 16 EVA, right? With screws. But unidirectional carbon, sand finish, 16 millimeters, EVA core with stringers. It also incorporates low poly design and the multi-weight system.
When you say sand finish, is that a grit texture? Is that a raw carbon?
Yeah. Oh yeah, 16 first. 16, honeycomb, Unidirectional carbon, sand finish, incorporates low poly design, and the multi-weight system. Oh yeah, the honeycomb has black butt caps, and on the face, it's a broken logo. Not broken logo, dotted line. And then this is like metal bone, we call it metal bone 4. We call this version 4 because you guys didn't see versions 2 and 3 because we never brought them to the market, so we'll call this version 4. The screws are right here. This is the older mode, has a little bit of low poly design. It's 14.5 millimeters. And at the end of the day, it's unidirectional carbon and also sand grit finish. And they all have a little bit of elongated handle, right? So they're good for a tui. And that's the line. And this is the paddle that Rafa plays with. This is the paddle Rafa plays with. And Rafa is quite boisterous at times.
One clarification, low poly.
With so much talk about the advantages that a brand like Adidas might have, something I'm also curious about is the challenges.
Yeah, I think it's worth mentioning that, you know, the current environment with 2 regulatory bodies, 2 sets of guidelines, 2 different ways of testing, you know, what the outputs are of those tests. It's an interesting time for sure. And I think, but what's interesting about it is, on the surface at least, and in terms of as deep as I can go, there is genuine interest in seeing the sport kind of being, I don't want to say the word regulated because I think that's the wrong word, but governed at a level where, you know, everybody doesn't have to have this paddle because it's the absolute best, and they've figured out a way to, you know, make something completely different. Because if you think about other sports over the course of time, if you think about tennis or pickleball or padel, you know, we all started with wood and then we migrated through materials over time. So I think the regulatory bodies have a difficult job in that they want to control output, I think, which is important, but they can't also just completely limit innovation.
There are a ton of ways that brands will come into an industry and really make their announcement loud and clear. Sometimes it's through product and sometimes it's through messaging. And in the case of Adidas, one thing that they did recently was their player signings. Adidas signed 2 players this year. They went straight to the top of the rankings and signed Federico Staksrud and Mari Humberg, both popular players in their own right.
You know, and signing Fede was, I believed when I started that we needed to put a stake in the ground. If people were really going to consider the entry into the sport as a commitment to the sport, you know, we needed to put a stake in the ground. We had Rafa, awesome working with Rafa, great player, you know, is always prominent on the tour. Signing Mari, you know, still looking at other people. But Fede, if you really get into it with the paddles, he kind of knows what he can feel. And then it's a lot of back and forth and helping him articulate and us understand, translate that into product design and development. And there's starting to be conversation around the, you know, the differences now in the game between singles and doubles, because the game's changed so much. And I believe that, you know, come September 1st, when UPAA goes to fully certified paddles, not interim and provisional approval, there's going to be a more cat and mouse is going to come back into the singles game. You know, and try to think in advance of that is a difficult proposition right now in paddle development.
So what's next for Adidas, and what plans do they have outside of just equipment?
No, I think in the short term, you know, we get paddles into the market, start to get some acceptance, you know, start to really build not only our pro peloton, but also building an influencer and ambassador army. You know, we're working on a couple proposals with content creators to kind of help tell the brand story a little bit in a deeper fashion. Also working on a couple proposals with, you know, I don't want to call it an academy, but like a centralized location to really develop product, test with a wide variety of players, and whether that be paddles or footwear or apparel, you know, and also a place for us to create content and call home. And after that, you know, I don't know. A lot of that will be dictated by what happens in the plain public, both on the, whether it be USAP, the takeaway that we really want out of these 2 days from today and tomorrow and doing this event and bringing the content creators and reviewers and really getting a chance to tell our story is there's a commitment here now from a larger body that is Adidas plus our group, which is, All Racket Sports. There is a larger commitment here to this space that is pickleball in a real and meaningful way, not just a chance to make paddles and make money. There's a lot of companies that are trying to make paddles and make money. We're trying to be part of the ecosystem, support players, support junior players, support influencers and ambassadors, support retail, right? Support events, support development programs. There's a real and meaningful earnestness to be part of the ecosystem in a professional way, not just taking, but giving.
And if you're waiting for my in-depth review of the paddle, that's gonna have to wait because I just haven't tested it thoroughly enough. But if you wanted my first impression, I would say that it has noticeable power. I'm not sure if the control is there, and something else to consider is that it is spray-on grit.
Pickleball is unique in that it doesn't matter age, gender, shape, ethnicity, anything, really. It really cuts across all those demographic buckets that people try to put people in and say, I'm a pickleball player.